Alright, so hi guys, I am back home and I've had time to sort of like digest my trip to Portland. First off, thank you for tuning in and watching the vlog series that I did. They were a lot of fun to make. If you haven't seen them yet, I will link them in the description below for you. Okay, so Portland. This is Portland, Oregon, not Portland on the East Coast. This is my first time being up there and my first time also being in Oregon. I was up there for 2 full days. And I will start off this sort of like review by saying that I would definitely go back again. So when I was planning for this trip, like you guys saw in my planning for Portland video, I broke up the things that I wanted to do into a couple of different categories. The categories that I picked were food, drinks, nature, museums, tourist traps, and then miscellaneous. So for the sake of organization, let's take it category by category. Alright, first category is food. Food in Portland was just great. I had like a really good mix of like affordable places like the food trucks. I had some like average priced places like Bamboo Sushi and then Wild Abandon. I also found myself at Higgins, which was a much fancier restaurant than I had originally anticipated, and with that was a little bit of a higher price point. Anyway, so the bottom line is that there are a ton of different food options at varying price points. So if you are craving something or if you're like looking to try out different cuisines, Portland is gonna have something for you. The one thing that I do want to note is that it was kind of actually hard for me to find a breakfast place that was open before 9 a.m. with the exception of like coffee shops. So I think next time I go, I'm gonna try and sleep in a little bit more. All right, next up are drinks, bars, and breweries. In a way, my trip sort of became a beer tasting trip because the friends that I took recommendations from like beer, and then that was reflected in their list of places to go. But really though, there wasn't like a bad pub or brewery that I went to. I definitely recommend Deschutes and Growler Guys. If you are a beer connoisseur and you want a amazing selection, or if you are someone who's maybe just getting into beer, they have dozens of beers on tap. And everyone that I've spoke to at those 2 places were really like willing to talk to me about the different selections they have. If you are looking for a couple of beers to take back with you to like the hotel room or to take home with you, then it's worth mentioning that Belmont Station has one of the biggest beer selections that I've seen in just a beer store. Next up is nature. So I tried to pile all of my nature things together on Monday, which was a holiday. And to be fair, in hindsight, that was a pretty bad idea on my end, but that also didn't seem to make the stuff that I saw like any less disappointing. The Japanese gardens were closed for renovations, and the International Rose Test Garden was like super pruned back and like almost sort of dead looking. But you know, like after walking around for like half an hour, I was sort of starting like to dig the macabre gothic feel to it, but I was still bummed that I didn't get to see like zillions of roses that I wouldn't be able to see here in California. Should have probably expected that though, because it's winter, but that's totally my bad, not their bad. After the Rose Garden and Japanese Garden sort of fell through, I wanted to see if I could take the in-park train to the zoo, and that was also shut down for renovations. Overall, I'm not going to knock Washington Park off of like my recommended places to check out. In fact, if I do go to Portland again, I would actually be anxious to go back to Washington Park and see the roses in bloom and see the new expanded Japanese gardens. Alright, so next up is museums. Alright, I only ended up going to the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry because I couldn't take the train to the Forestry Museum in Washington Park. But that's okay. OMSI was a pretty cool museum overall. But similar to Washington Park, they had some installations happening, and so not all of it was open, and I felt like I didn't get the full like OMSI experience. Basically, like after you walk in, you can take an escalator upstairs, and then you can like check out these 2 main halls. But the 2 halls that are upstairs were transitioning like in between exhibitions when I was up there, and so there wasn't as much to do or to see as I would have hoped. There's also a section for parents upstairs with like small kids, which was cool, but obviously I was by myself, I don't have a kid, I wasn't gonna go in there. Downstairs, like almost every museum has a shop, they also had a restaurant, they also had a couple of other wings. There was a wing that was like sort of physics based, and I want to say it was called Turbine Hall. And in my Portland video, you'll see that's where Nanoland lives, which is kind of cool. There was also a wing for their planetarium, which was really cool. OMSI also has their own built-in IMAX theater in-house, which was really cool. And they also had a submarine outside, just like parked in the river, and you could take tours of it. For me, because I love museums, it was a good way to kill 2 or 3 hours. I can imagine it taking a longer time if you had a family, and I would say that it is very family friendly. Next up are tourist traps. I went to Pioneer Courthouse Square on a Sunday morning, and it was, not gonna lie, a little bit dull. It had been raining all morning, and there was also like some sort of show that was being either set up or packed away, and the visitor center that's also located there was closed when I got there. The guidebook that recommended it said that it was good for like grabbing a coffee and then people watching, but there isn't much people watching to do when it's raining at 10 a.m. on a Sunday. Anyway, from the square, I ended up hiking a few blocks up until I got to Powell's Books. This is a whole bookstore that takes up like a whole city block in Portland. With there being no sales tax in Portland, I of course splurged a little bit on books and postcards for friends. They have a coffee shop in-house too, so I can see the appeal and like how easy it would have been to like buy a book and then get a coffee and then just like sit back and relax and just chill for a while. I definitely recommend it to anyone, even if you're not super into books, just because it's such a staple in Portland. Alright, next category is miscellaneous. These are places that didn't quite fit into other categories that I wanted to check out. The first one that comes to mind is Guardian Games. It's a game and hobby shop which made my little nerd heart grow tenfold because this place was gigantic. They had every board game, every miniature, every trading card, every RPG book set, every dice set that you ever could have hoped for. In the back, there were actually probably like 3 or 4 dozen tables for people to like play games at, and here's the kicker, they had a bar in-house too. Like, what? As much as I would have loved to have lived there for like the rest of my life, I settled on buying a couple of new D20s to commemorate that trip. The other place that I wanted to mention really quickly here is Ground Control, which is like a classic arcade. They boast having over 90 arcade games, and then upstairs they have a collection of pinball machines that are really well kept. Ground Control also has a bar in-house, so you can tell there's a bit of a theme here. The night that I was there was actually a rep from a company called Not Your Father's Root Beer, and so I ended up getting one of those for free, which was awesome. I would definitely recommend both Ground Control and Guardian Games if you're into the nerd scene or if you're like me and that's just your life. The last thing that I want to mention about Portland, which doesn't fit into the categories, has to do with getting around. Portland is really walkable and super easy to navigate. But for those times that you don't want to walk, or like you're carrying something heavy, or if you were like me and it was just raining the entire weekend, public transit is actually really, really nice up there. I ended up never waiting more than 15 minutes for a bus, and the 15-minute wait that I experienced was actually like on a Sunday night at 10:30 at night. And so like I found when I was waiting for the bus during the daytime, even on the holiday, I was only waiting like 5 or 10 minutes, which was great. All of the drivers that I spoke to are like more than happy to help you figure out where you're going and how to get there. And the other cool thing about Portland that not all other cities that I've been to have is a light rail system. Their particular light rail system is like really well maintained from what I can tell, at least compared to like what I'm used to in the Bay Area. Anyway guys, thank you so much for tuning in. This trip has been a lot of fun and I really appreciate the chance to be able to share it with you guys. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you like me, consider subscribing to the channel, and I will catch you guys in the next one.